The massive hegemony present ship Dominion fist cut through the endless darkness of space like a steel predator, its hull stretched nearly 2 miles long, bristling with weapon turrets and sensor rays that could detect a single fighter craft from 3-star systems away. Deep within its armored belly, thousands of prisoners from dozens of worlds sat in reinforced cells, their dreams of freedom crushed under the weight of hegemony chains. General Kethva stepped through the main detention corridor with the confidence of a conqueror. His massive reptilian frame cast long shadows under the harsh blue lighting, each footstep echoing like thunder through the metal passages. Standing 8 feet tall with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian, he was the perfect embodiment of hegemony's superiority. His yellow eyes, cold as winter stars, swept over the rows of defeated enemies with satisfaction. The detention levels housed the galaxy's finest warriors, now reduced to mere trophies of war. In cell block Alpha 3, a group of Torgan berserkers, huddled together, their natural bone armor cracked and dulled from battle. These creatures once terrorized entire sectors with their unstoppable charges and devastating strength. Now they barely looked up as the general passed. Further down, the swift Valyrian scouts pressed against their cell walls with desperate eyes, their forearms, once capable of wielding multiple weapons simultaneously while moving faster than most species could even see, now hummed uselessly at their sides. The Valyrians had been the backbone of the Resistance's reconnaissance network until the hegemony developed new sensor technology that could track their movements. The massive Gromoth heavy troopers occupied reinforced cells that could have housed 20 smaller beings. These walking tanks stood nearly 7 feet tall and weighed over 800 pounds of pure muscle and determination. Their thick hides could deflect most small arms fire, and their crushing strength could bend steel beams like wire. Yet even they had fallen to the hegemony's superior numbers and advanced weaponry. Kithra paused at each cell block, savoring the sight of broken spirits and defeated champions. This was what happened to those who dared oppose the hegemony's righteous expansion across the galaxy. Every species eventually learned the same lesson. Resistance was futile. Submission was survival. The general's aide, a nervous hegemony junior officer named Vextel, scurried behind him carrying a data pad filled with prisoner reports. Yes, sir. The morning count shows all high-value targets accounted for. The Torgan war chief is showing signs of accepting our terms. And 3 Valyrian scouts have already provided intelligence about rebel supply routes. Excellent. Kethel rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Fear is always the most effective teacher. What of the others? The Gromoth leaders remain defiant, but their morale appears to be breaking. The other species are adapting to captivity. As expected, Vextel consulted his data pad. However, there is one anomaly in cell block 7 Alpha that you might find interesting. They reached the section in question, and Kethva's triumphant mood immediately shifted to confusion. Among the galaxy's most feared warriors sat something that simply didn't belong. In a cell designed to hold creatures capable of tearing through reinforced steel, a small, pale being sat quietly on the metal bench. The creature was tiny by galactic standards, perhaps 5.5 feet tall and weighing maybe 160 pounds. Its skin was a soft pink color that looked almost translucent under the harsh lighting, showing blue veins beneath the surface. Instead of natural armor, claws, or weapons, it appeared completely defenseless. Its limbs were thin and looked fragile enough to snap under moderate pressure. What caught Kethra's attention most was the creature's clothing. The torn and stained fabric might have once been some kind of military uniform, but it looked primitive compared to the advanced combat gear worn by other species. There were no energy shields, no integrated weapon systems, no enhancement technology visible anywhere. The general's mandibles clicked together in amusement as he approached the cell. This had to be some kind of mistake. Perhaps a civilian who had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe a servant species that one of the warrior races had brought along. "What is this pathetic thing?" he growled. His words, automatically translated into Galactic Standard by the ship's communication system. The sound echoed through the corridor, causing several other prisoners to look up with interest. The small creature raised its head, revealing eyes that were a warm brown color, unlike anything Kether had seen. Most galactic species had eyes that reflected their evolutionary heritage. The Torgans were yellow like a predator's, the Valerians were silver and constantly moving. The Gromoth had small black eyes that missed nothing. But these brown eyes seemed almost gentle. Corporal Ejiu of Defense Force, serial number 7749 Delta. The creature replied in a clear, steady voice that showed no fear despite being face-to-face with one of the galaxy's most feared commanders. Kethres' head tilted in confusion. Earth. He had conquered dozens of worlds and knew the names of hundreds more. But this was completely unfamiliar. He turned to his aide. "Vixtel, access the database. What information do we have on this Earth?" The aide's claws tapped rapidly on his data pad. "Sir, I'm finding very limited information. It appears to be a small blue world in an outer rim system. The initial reports classified it as a minor target with primitive technology and minimal strategic value." "Then what is one of its? What did you call yourself?" "Human," Jiwu answered simply. "What is a human doing among my collection of the galaxy's greatest warriors?" Kethres' laughter started as a low rumble and built into a booming sound that echoed through the entire detention level. "This is absurd. Look at this creature. It has no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced strength or speed. Its world must be populated by the most pathetic species in the galaxy." The other prisoners had turned to watch the exchange. Some of the Torgan berserkers actually looked embarrassed to be sharing space with such an obviously weak specimen. Even the usually stoic Gromoth troopers seemed puzzled by the small human's presence among their wrecks. But Jiwu just sat there calmly, meeting the general's mocking gaze without flinching. There was something in those brown eyes that Kethva couldn't quite identify. Not fear, not defiance exactly, but something else, something that made the general slightly uncomfortable. Though he couldn't understand why. "Tell me, little human," Kethva continued, pressing his scaled face closer to the energy barrier that sealed the cell. "What possible threat could your species pose to the mighty hegemony? Did you get lost on your way to surrender?" 3 cycles had passed since General Kethva's encounter with the strange human prisoner, and the monotony of deep space travel was beginning to wear on his crew. The asterisk Dominion's fist asterisk had been in hyperspace for weeks, carrying its cargo of defeated warriors back to the hegemony capital world for public display. The soldiers were restless, their victory celebrations long forgotten in the endless routine of ship duties. Kethva stood on the bridge, watching the swirling blue tunnel of hyperspace through the main view screen. His scaled fingers drummed against the armrest of his command chair as he considered options for maintaining crew morale. A board crew was a dangerous crew, especially on a ship filled with potentially dangerous prisoners. "Sir," his aide Vextel approached cautiously. "The crew chiefs are reporting increased incidents of fighting among the ranks. The soldiers need something to occupy their time." The general's yellow eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. "Of course, it's been too long since we've had proper entertainment." He turned to face his bridge crew. "Clear the central cargo bay. We're going to remind everyone why the hegemony remains supreme." Within hours, the massive cargo bay had been transformed into a crude but effective arena. The space normally used for storing supplies and equipment was now surrounded by hastily constructed viewing platforms. Portable lighting rigs cast harsh white beams down onto the cleared floor, creating a circle of illumination roughly 50 feet across. The metal walls echoed with the excited voices of hundreds of hegemony soldiers who had gathered to watch the spectacle. Keffer took his position on the highest viewing platform, settling into a portable command throne that had been brought down from the bridge. The elevated position gave him a perfect view of the arena floor, while ensuring that everyone could see their commanding officer enjoying the show. The crowd of soldiers below him represented dozens of different hegemony species, all united in their love of combat and their confidence in their own superiority. Soldiers of the hegemony, Keffer's voice boomed through the ship's communication system. Today, we remind ourselves why we are the masters of this galaxy. You will witness the strength that has conquered 1,000 worlds and the weakness of those who dare oppose us. The crowd roared its approval, the sound echoing off the metal walls like thunder. Energy weapons were raised in salute, creating a brief light show as the soldiers fired harmless bursts into the air. The excitement was infectious, spreading through the gathered troops like wildfire. "Bring forth the first combatants," the general commanded. Two massive Gromoth heavy troopers were dragged into the arena, their thick arms bound with energy shackles. Even in captivity, these creatures were impressive specimens of warrior evolution. Their gray, rock-like skin could deflect most projectile weapons, and their crushing strength was legendary throughout the galaxy. They were forced to fight each other while the hegemony soldiers placed bets on the outcome. The battle was brutal but brief, ending when one Gromoth managed to use his superior reach to land a devastating blow to his opponent's head. The winner stood over his fallen comrade with obvious reluctance, his small black eyes showing the pain of being forced to harm one of his own kind. "Excellent," Keffer declared. "But now, my friends, we have something truly special, a creature so pathetic, so utterly weak, that its very presence among our prisoners is an insult to warriors everywhere." The crowd buzzed with curiosity as guards dragged the human into the arena. Dew looked even smaller under the harsh lights, his pale skin almost glowing against the dark metal floor. The torn remnants of his uniform fluttered as he was shoved forward, and he had to steady himself to avoid falling. "Behold," the general continued, "a human from the insignificant world called Earth. What as we demonstrate the fate that awaits all who oppose the hegemony's righteous expansion." The soldiers laughed and jeered, some calling out suggestions for creative ways to end the fight quickly. A few placed bets on how long the human would last, with most estimates ranging from 10 to 30 seconds. And his opponent, Keffer raised his voice dramatically. Grexter the Bone Crusher, champion of the Torgan Berserker clans. The arena shook as the massive Torgan warrior stomped into the circle of light. Grexter stood, nearly 9 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in natural bone spikes that could punch through armor plating. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, ending in clawed hands that had torn through countless enemies. Bone ridges ran along his skull like a crown, and his small red eyes burned with barely controlled rage. The crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch as they saw the matchup. This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be an execution. The human looked like a child standing next to the towering berserker, and the contrast was so extreme that several soldiers actually started laughing. Grexter began circling his prey like a predator, his massive feet leaving dents in the metal floor. He flexed his clawed hands, causing the bone spikes along his arms to extend further. The Torgan species was bred for war, their entire culture built around combat and conquest. This human represented everything they despised: weakness, softness, and the pathetic belief that intelligence could triumph over raw strength. "Begin," Kefir commanded, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. The Torgan warrior let out a bone-rattling war cry that echoed through the entire cargo bay. The sound was primal and terrifying, designed to freeze prey with fear. Before the killing blow landed, he charged forward like a living battering ram, his massive bulk moving with surprising speed across the arena floor. But something unexpected happened. Instead of cowering or trying to run, the human simply dropped low and rolled to the side. The movement was so fluid and precise that for a moment it looked almost like choreography. Grexter's charge carried him past his target, and he had to dig his claws into the metal floor to stop his momentum. The crowd fell silent, confused by what they had just witnessed. The human should have been crushed instantly, but instead he was now behind the Torgan warrior, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for such a small creature. Jiwoo didn't hesitate. As Grexter turned round, still off balance from his failed charge, the human darted between the alien's massive legs and struck with surgical precision at the back of the creature's knee. The blow looked almost gentle, but the 9-foot warrior suddenly stumbled forward, his leg buckling under his own weight, before anyone could fully process what was happening. The human had leaped onto a nearby support beam, using it to vault onto the Torgan's broad back. His arms wrapped round the alien's thick neck in what looked like an embrace, but the crowd watched in stunned silence as Grexter's struggles became weaker and weaker. The great berserker champion, veteran of 100 battles, slowly sank too, his knees, and then collapsed face first onto the metal floor. The human released his hold and stepped back, breathing heavily but otherwise unharmed. The entire cargo bay was dead silent. Over 500 hegemony soldiers stared at the impossible scene before them, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The most feared warrior in their prison had been defeated by a creature that looked like it could barely lift a standard issue rifle. 30 seconds. That's how long it had taken for everything the hegemony believed about strength and superiority to be turned upside down. Kefir felt his scaled hands gripping the armrests of his throne so tightly that the metal began to bend. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something far more dangerous. This was the moment when the hunter realized he might actually be the prey. The ship's corridors felt different as Kefir made his way to his private quarters that night. The usual confidence in his step had been replaced by something he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. The arena fight had shaken him more than he cared to admit. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like what the human had done to Grexter. His quarters occupied the entire top level of the command section, a sprawling space that reflected his status as one of the hegemony's most successful generals. The walls were lined with trophies from 100 conquered worlds, crystalline formations from the silicon-based Nexari, ceremonial weapons from the warrior clans of Vortex Prime, and preserved specimens from dozens of extinct species that had dared to resist hegemony rule. Two guards escorted the human into the room, their weapons trained on the small prisoner despite the obvious size difference. Jiwoo walked calmly between them, his brown eyes taking in the displays of conquest without any visible emotion. When the guards positioned him in front of the general's massive desk, he simply stood there waiting, as if this were a normal business meeting rather than an interrogation. "Leave us," Kefir commanded, dismissing the guards with a wave of his scaled hand. The soldiers hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with leaving their general alone with any prisoner. But training overcame their concerns. The heavy door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving predator and prey face to face. The general's quarters were designed to intimidate. The ceiling stretched 20 feet high, making most visitors feel small and insignificant. Holographic displays showed tactical maps of hegemony space, with conquered systems marked in red and potential targets highlighted in yellow. The desk itself was carved from a single piece of black stone taken from the hegemony homeworld, a monument to the Empire's enduring power. But the human seemed completely unaffected by the intimidating atmosphere. He looked round the room with what appeared to be casual interest, as if he were a tourist visiting a museum rather than a prisoner, facing interrogation. When Kethva gestured to a chair across from his desk, Jiwoo sat down with the same calm composure he had shown since his capture. How? The question exploded from Kethva's throat like a physical force. All the frustration and confusion of the past few hours poured into that single word. Your species appears to have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength. You're smaller and weaker than every other intelligent species in the galaxy. Yet you defeated a Torgan Berserker champion in single combat. Explain this impossibility. Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment, his brown eyes studying the general's face with an intensity that made the reptilian commander uncomfortable. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire room. Tell me, General, what do you know about evolution? The question caught Kethva off guard. Evolution, the process by which species develop advantages over their environment. The strong survive, the weak perish. Basic science, exactly. But here's the thing about evolution that most species don't understand until it's too late. Jiwoo leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since his capture, he smiled. The expression was friendly, almost gentle, but something about it made the general's scales bristle with unease. Most worlds in this galaxy are what we would call garden worlds. Perfect temperature, ideal atmosphere, abundant resources. The dominant species on those worlds evolved to be the apex predator. Yes, but they never faced extinction. They never had to adapt or die every single day of their existence. The human stood up and walked to one of the holographic displays showing a star map. His finger traced the location of various conquered worlds as he continued speaking. The Torgans evolved on a world where the biggest, strongest, most heavily armored creature dominated. So they became bigger, stronger, and more armored. The Valerians evolved on a world where speed and agility were key. So they became faster and developed multiple limbs for a better coordination. Every species in your empire represents a single evolutionary solution to a specific set of environmental challenges. Kethva found himself listening intently despite his growing unease. There was something hypnotic about the human's voice, a calm certainty that demanded attention. But Earth, Jiwoo continued, turning back to face the general. Earth is what we call a death world. Not because it's the most dangerous planet in the universe, but because it's dangerous in every possible way simultaneously. The human began counting on his fingers, and each point hit Kethva like a physical blow. Ice ages that last for thousands of years, forcing entire species to adapt or freeze to death. Volcanic eruptions that can block out the sun for decades. Diseases that can kill millions before we even understand what's happening. Predators that hunt in packs. Predators that hunt alone. Predators in the air, on land, and in the water. Natural disasters that can level entire continents. Jiwoo's smile grew wider, and now Kethva could see something in those brown eyes that chilled him to his core. It wasn't madness exactly, but it was something far more dangerous. Absolute confidence. We didn't evolve to be the biggest, or the strongest, or the fastest. General, we evolved to be the most adaptable. When the ice came, we learned to make fire. When the predators hunted us, we learned to hunt them back. When diseases tried to kill us, we learned to heal ourselves. When the earth shook and the mountains fell, we learned to build better. The human walked back to his chair and sat down. never breaking eye contact with the general. You want to know how I defeated Grexter? It's simple. He was bred for one type of combat, charging forward and overpowering his enemies through brute force. But I was bred by a world that throws every possible challenge at its children and expects them to find a way to survive. Kether felt his throat go dry. You're saying your entire species is like this. Every single one of us, the weakest human child, has survived challenges that would kill most adult members of other species. We don't just fight to win, General. We fight to ensure that nothing can ever threaten us again. The General's clawed hand moved almost unconsciously to his desk's control panel, accessing the ship's database. Earth's file appeared on the holographic display, a small blue world orbiting and unremarkable. Yellow star, the initial survey reports were brief and dismissive, classifying it as a minor target with primitive technology. But as Kether dug deeper into the records, he began to notice things that didn't make sense. The casualty reports from the Earth campaign showed surprisingly high losses for what should have been a simple conquest. Entire fleets had been reported as lost to navigation errors or destroyed by equipment. Malfunctions near human space, according to our records. Your world fell 6 months ago after minimal resistance, Kether said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Jiwoo's smile became even more unsettling. Is that what your records say? How interesting. Tell me, General, when your species wants to study a dangerous predator, what's the first thing you do? You observe it from a safe distance. Analyze its behavior patterns. Identify its weaknesses. The human's words hit him like a physical blow. Exactly. Now ask yourself this question. If you wanted to study the most powerful military force in the galaxy, how would you do it? Kether's blood ran cold as the implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. The human hadn't been captured. The human had been inserted, a living, breathing intelligence-gathering operation that had been studying hegemony ships, weapons, tactics, and psychology for months. You volunteered for this. He whispered. The greatest generals in history all understood. The same principle, Jiwoo replied calmly. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. We've been watching you, learning from you, adapting to you, and now we know exactly how to beat you. Outside the general's quarters, space suddenly didn't seem as empty as it had before. The piercing wail of battle alarms shattered the artificial night cycle aboard the Asterisk Dominion Fist Asterisk. Red warning lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow as the massive prison ship's automated systems detected what they had been designed to fear most, an unknown fleet emerging from hyperspace. At dangerously close range, Kether's eyes snapped open in his quarters, the conversation with the human still echoing in his mind. For the first time in his military career, he had gone to sleep without knowing at his thoughts. The alarms confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't a coincidence. He rolled out of his sleeping alcove and grabbed his command armor from its charging station, the advanced suit sealed around his massive frame with practiced efficiency, its integrated systems linking him instantly to the ship's tactical network. Status reports flooded his vision through the helmet's display, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The bridge was in chaos when he arrived. Officers from a dozen different hegemony species rushed between stations, their voices creating a cacophony of confused reports and contradictory orders. The main view screen showed the swirling tunnel of hyperspace, but the sensor displays told a very different story. Report. Kether's voice cut through the noise like a blade, instantly bringing order to the bridge. Sub-Commander Vexana, a slender female from the insectoid Klex species, turned from her sensor station with her forearms moving frantically over the controls. Her compound eyes reflected the data streaming across her displays, and her normally calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. "General, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. 30, 40, 50 ships and climbing," she announced, her voice cracking slightly. They appeared without warning. No hyperspace distortion detected until they were already emerging. Kepha felt his throat constrict. That was impossible. Hegemony sensors were the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of detecting hyperspace exits from light years away. No fleet should have been able to approach undetected. "Show me," he commanded, settling into his command throne. The main view screen flickered and shifted, replacing a hyperspace tunnel with a view of normal space. What Kepha saw defied everything he knew about military tactics and starship design. A massive fleet hung in the void around them. Ships ranged in a perfect sphere that enclosed the asterisk Dominion fist asterisk completely. The vessels looked almost primitive compared to hegemony technology. Their hulls were angular and utilitarian, lacking the smooth curves and gleaming surfaces that marked advanced alien engineering. Some appeared to be converted cargo ships. Others looked like they had been cobbled together from salvage parts, but they moved with a precision that spoke of expert coordination, and energy readings showed their weapons were already charging to full power. "Sir," Communications Officer Beckstar called out from his station, his thick Groma fingers dancing over controls designed for a more delicate species. "We're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It's coming from every ship." "Simultaneously, put it through," Kepha ordered, though part of him already knew what he was going to see. The view screen split, and a human face appeared on the left side. The man was older than Ju, perhaps 60 standard years, with steel grey hair cut. Short in military fashion, scars crossed his weathered features like a road map of battles fought and survived. His eyes were the same brown as the prisoners, but they held decades of command experience and something that made Kepha's scales crawl: absolute confidence. "This is Admiral Park Min-ho of the Earth Defense Force," the human said, his voice calm and professional despite the threatening circumstances. "You are holding one of our people. Return Corporal Ijiwu to us immediately, and we might let some of you live." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the view screen in disbelief. This creature, barely larger than a Gemini child, was threatening the most powerful prison ship in the fleet. The audacity was breathtaking. Kethra's initial shock quickly transformed into rage. How dared this insignificant species threaten the hegemony? His clawed hands gripped the armrests of his throne as he leaned forward, bringing his massive reptilian face closer to the communication pickup. "You dare threaten the hegemony?" he snarled, his voice echoing through the bridge. "Your pathetic world already fell to us 6 months ago. We crushed your defenses and scattered your fleets across the galaxy. You have nothing left to bargain with except empty threats." The human admiral's expression didn't change. He didn't show fear, anger, or even surprise at Kethra's outburst. Instead, he simply smiled with the same unsettling calm that his subordinate had displayed. "Did it?" Admiral Park asked quietly. "Computer, show him soul." The right side of the view screen lit up with a new image that hit Kepha like a physical blow. A massive city sprawled across the display, its towering spires reaching toward alien skies. Millions of lights twinkled in the artificial twilight, showing a thriving metropolis that was clearly very much alive and unconquered. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings in organized traffic patterns, while massive orbital elevators stretched up toward space stations that bristled with defensive weapons. "We withdrew." "General," the Admiral continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth, "there's a difference. We've been studying you, learning your weaknesses, analyzing your tactics and technology. My soldier down there has been gathering intelligence for months. And now we know everything we need to know about how to destroy you. The implications crashed over Kethva like a tsunami. Earth hadn't fallen. The humans had staged a tactical retreat, allowing the hegemony to believe they had won while secretly preparing for this moment. Every casualty report, every victory, celebration, every strategic briefing had been based on a lie. You let us capture your worlds, he whispered, the truth finally sinking in. We let you think you captured our worlds, Admiral Park corrected. Every hegemony ship that entered human space was carefully observed and studied, every weapon you fired, every tactic you used, every weakness you revealed was catalogued and analyzed. You weren't conquering us, General. You were teaching us how to defeat you. Kethva spun round, intending to order his guards to bring the human prisoner to the bridge immediately. But the chair where Jiu had been sitting was empty. The energy restraints that should have held him hung open, their security systems somehow bypassed. Where is the prisoner? He roared at his security chief. Sir, I am showing all detention cells secure, the officer replied, frantically checking his displays. Wait, there are reports of power failures in multiple sections. Emergency lighting is active on decks 7 through 15, through the bridge's observation windows. Kethva could see other ships in his convoy beginning to report similar problems. Running lights were flickering. Weapon systems were cycling offline and back online, and several vessels were sending distress signals indicating major system failures. Admiral Park's voice cut through the growing chaos like a knife. The thing about humans, General, is that we don't just learn from our mistakes. We learn from yours too, right now. Every ship in your fleet is discovering that your supposedly impenetrable security systems have some very interesting vulnerabilities. On the tactical display, Kithar watched in horror as red warning indicators began appearing across his entire fleet. Ships were reporting weapon malfunctions, shield failures, and navigation errors. The perfect formation that had been the pride of the hegemony was dissolving into chaos. How? He demanded, though part of him already knew the answer. 6 months of detailed observation, General. 6 months of studying every system, every protocol, every weakness in your technology. Did you really think we would waste such an opportunity? The view screen showed dozens of human ships moving into attack position, their weapons locked onto specific targets with surgical precision. They didn't move like a desperate fleet fighting for survival. They moved like predators who had found their prey exactly where they wanted it, somewhere in the depths of his ship. Kethva knew that Corporal Ijiu was no longer a prisoner. He was a saboteur, and the hunt had officially begun. The emergency lighting system kicked in across the Asterisk Dominion fist asterisk, bathing every corridor in pulsing red light that made the massive prison ship look like the inside of a beating heart. But this wasn't just a power failure or routine maintenance issue. This was something far more terrifying. A coordinated breakout that was happening simultaneously across every single detention level. Kethva's command throne shook as another explosion rocked the ship somewhere deep in its bowels. The tactical display in front of him showed a nightmare scenario unfolding in real time. Security cameras throughout the vessel were going offline one by one, but not before showing scenes that defied everything he thought he knew about prison security. The Tworgan berserkers, those same warriors who had seemed broken and defeated just days before, were now smashing through reinforced barriers with renewed fury. But they weren't acting like desperate prisoners making a hopeless escape attempt. They moved with purpose, following carefully planned routes that avoided the heaviest security zones while systematically disabling key ship systems. The swift Valyrian scouts had somehow acquired tools and weapons, their forearms working in perfect coordination to override door locks and disable security sensors. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated. Someone had been teaching them the ship's layout and security protocols. Even the massive Gromoth heavy troopers, who should have been contained in the most secure cells, were breaking free and moving through the ship with military precision. They carried improvised weapons and seemed to know exactly where the most critical systems were located. "Sir," Sub-Commander Thexana called out, her voice cracking with panic. "We're getting reports from all detention levels. Every single prisoner block is reporting simultaneous breakouts. This isn't random. General, someone coordinated this, Kethres." Yellow eyes narrowed as the terrible truth began to dawn on him. The human. Somehow, during his months of apparent captivity, Jiwu had been planning this moment. Not just his own escape, but a ship-wide rebellion that would cripple the Asterisk dominions. Fist Asterisk from within just as the human fleet attacked from without. How? He roared, his clawed hands leaving deep gouges in the armrests of his throne. How did one small creature organize hundreds of prisoners from dozens of different species? The answer came not from his bridge crew, but from the tactical display itself. The human fleet outside wasn't just attacking randomly. Their weapons were targeting specific systems with surgical precision, hitting exactly the right spots to cause maximum damage while avoiding areas where prisoners might be located. They had detailed schematics of every hegemony ship design, shields failing on decks 7 through 12. Thexana reported, her compound eyes reflecting the chaos of data streaming across her displays. "Sir, their weapons aren't just hitting US, they're injecting some kind of computer virus into our systems. Every time they fire, our own technology turns against us." The main view screen showed the battle raging outside, and what Kithva saw there shattered his understanding of warfare itself. The human fleet didn't fight like any enemy the hegemony had ever faced, instead of massive capital ships trading volleys of devastating firepower. They used swarm tactics that reminded him of hunting pack predators. Smaller human vessels darted between the much larger hegemony ships like angry insects, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns that overwhelmed defensive systems through sheer numbers rather than raw power. Every time a hegemony ship tried to target one of the human attackers, 3 more would appear from different angles, forcing the defenders to split their fire and reducing their effectiveness. But it was their electronic warfare capabilities that truly terrified him. The humans weren't just destroying hegemony systems, they were corrupting them, turning the advanced technology against itself. Weapon systems that should have been firing at human ships were instead targeting other hegemony vessels, navigation. Computers were sending ships on collision courses with their own allies. Even the communication systems were being used to spread false orders and create confusion throughout the fleet. "They've been studying us," Kethva whispered as the horrifying scope of the human strategy became clear. "Every system we used, every tactic we employed, every weakness we showed them during those 6 months, they memorized it all." An explosion much closer than the others shook the bridge, and Kethva realized that the fighting had reached the command section. Through the security monitors that were still functioning, he could see human soldiers moving through the corridors with military precision. But these weren't the frail creatures he had expected. These were warriors who moved like apex predators, their every action calculated for maximum efficiency. They worked in small teams, each member covering the others with weapons that looked primitive but proved devastatingly effective. Their armor was lightweight compared to hegemony battle suits, but it gave them speed and flexibility that more heavily armored troops couldn't match. They moved through the ship like they owned it, and in a very real sense, they did. The blast doors to the bridge groaned under some tremendous impact, then groaned again. Kethva's security chief was already moving his guards into defensive positions, But the general could see the fear in their eyes. These were soldiers who had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions, but they had never faced an enemy like this. "Sir," Communications Officer Beckstar called out, his thick fingers trembling as they worked his console. "I'm picking up human communications throughout the ship. They're coordinating with the escaped prisoners, providing them with tactical support and detailed maps of our layouts." The third impact on the blast doors was accompanied by a sound that made every alien on the bridge freeze in terror. Human laughter. Not the cruel amusement of conquerors, but the genuine joy of predators who had finally cornered their prey. When the doors finally exploded inward, the scene that followed would haunt Kepha as nightmares for the rest of his life. Human soldiers poured through the breach like a tide of destruction, their movements so fluid and coordinated that they seemed to be dancing rather than fighting. They didn't waste motion, didn't hesitate, didn't show mercy, but leading them wasn't some battle-hardened veteran or cybernetically enhanced super soldier. It was Corporal Jiwoo, the same small, seemingly fragile prisoner who had been sitting in a cell just hours before. He carried a hegemony plasma rifle with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had been trained on the weapon for years, not days. "The thing about humans," Jiwoo said conversationally as he walked across the bridge, stepping over the bodies of fallen guards with casual indifference, "is that we don't just survive extinction-level events. We learn from them. Every plague that tried to wipe us out taught us about biological warfare. Every natural disaster that tried to destroy our cities taught us about engineering and logistics. Every war that tried to break our spirit taught you as something new about how to fight." Through the main view screen, Kepha watched the last of his escort ships fall to the human fleet. The mighty vessels that had once struck fear into the hearts of entire star systems were now burning wrecks, drifting through space. His own ship shuddered as something large attached to the hull with a metallic clang that echoed through the entire superstructure. "Boarding pods," one of his surviving officers whispered in horror. "We studied your tactics for 6 months," Jiwoo continued, never taking his eyes off Kepha. "We learned your language, analyzed your technology, studied your psychology. Did you know that most hegemony species have never faced an enemy that deliberately appears weak to lure them into overconf? Idence. It's a very human trait, and it works. Every single time." More explosions echoed through the ship as human boarding parties cut their way through the hull in dozens of locations. The Dominion's Fist Asterisk, which had once been the pride of the hegemony fleet, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they had underestimated at every possible level. Admiral Park's voice crackled over the ship's communication system, his words carrying to every corner of the vessel. "This is just the beginning. General Kepha, you wanted to conquer Earth. You wanted to add humanity to your collection of defeated species. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in doing something no other enemy has ever managed." Kepha felt restraints clicking round his wrists as human soldiers secured him with professional efficiency. His command staff was being processed with the same calm competence that the hegemony had once used on their own prisoners. "What?" he managed to whisper. Admiral Park's voice carried a smile that was somehow audible even through the static-filled communication system. "You've taught us everything we need to know to conquer you. Now Earth conquers the galaxy." The last thing Kepha saw before the stun bolt hit him was Corporal Jiwoo saluting the human soldiers with a grin that promised the galaxy would never be the same. The age of human dominance had begun, and it had started with a single soldier who was willing to spend months in captivity to give his species the greatest gift of all: knowledge of their enemies' weaknesses. Asterisk, asterisk, the end, asterisk, asterisk.